Thanks to a string of storms, more than 120,000 claims have been submitted to the National Flood Insurance Program so far this year. The problem, the program was already $25 billion in debt before the Harvey, Irma, Maria triple punch. The federally funded insurance program now needs a massive bailout to keep paying claims. American homes in Houston, the Florida Keys, and Puerto Rico are not the only things underwater this season. So is the entire National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. The hurricanes accounted for an additional $16 billion in claims to the NFIP, which was already nearly $25 billion in debt before the storms hit. Steve Ellis, the vice president of Taxpayers for Common Sense, thinks it's high time that the flood insurance program gets reformed to stop subsidizing risky building.
The fundamental responsibility of government is to protect their citizens, but here you have a program that's subsidizing people to actually build in harm's way, to stay in harm's way.
Are you saying that they're almost encouraged to keep building in places that they're at high risk?
Absolutely. Basically, this program is subsidizing people to rebuild and stay in these areas.
Because it's so cheap.
Exactly.
Just how cheap? Nationwide, the average flood policy through the program costs only $712 a year, according to the Natural Resources Defense Council. Cheap rates lead to hefty payouts and multiple claims. According to a recent report by Pew Charitable Trusts, there are 150,000 insured homes that have flooded at least twice. They represent only 1% of the properties in the program, but account for up to 30% of all payouts at a cost of $12.5 billion. So if we look at the statistics that show that maybe only 1% of the homes in the program are part of that repetitive loss, yet they're getting 30% of the payout.
Exactly. They're making up a disproportionate amount of the losses, even though there are a small number of the properties in the program.
Well, how are we not fixing that?
Well, it's never politically popular to actually raise somebody's insurance rates. And then also, there is a kind of an American shake your fist at Mother Nature and we will rebuild sort of aspect there as well. And so we're big-hearted people, but we can't afford to be soft-headed.
And can't keep affording big bailouts, Ellis says. On the House side, Congress voted to forgive $16 billion of debt incurred from recent hurricane claims. So, lesson learned? Not exactly. Mick Mulvaney, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, wrote to the Senate, quote, "The NFIP is simply not fiscally sustainable in its present form." The White House wants major reforms, no coverage for new homes in floodplains, no subsidized rates for people who can afford to pay market rates, and no coverage for extreme repetitive loss properties. But those reforms weren't included in the House bill, and until reforms are made, Ellis says the program creates a vicious cycle for the homeowner and the taxpayer.
I'm not here to say you can't build. It's just we shouldn't have to subsidize you to build and to rebuild in those areas. And so those are the sort of issues. It becomes less about what people do on their property and becomes more about what is the federal government, what is Uncle Sam or sometimes Uncle Sucker doing to subsidize high-risk development.
Having passed in the House, the disaster relief bill is now with the Senate, which could take an initial vote next week. Right now, it looks like the flood insurance program will get another huge taxpayer bailout.